The dome's transparent ceiling stretched above them like a fragile glass, ceiling separating the colony from the endless void beyond. Under its soft artificial glow, Elara Voss and her younger sister Naomi sat side by side on a low bench in the observation chamber, their shoulders almost touching, but years of distance and silence still lingering in the space between them. Outside, the distant stars shimmered faintly, their twinkling forms dimmed by the planet's thick atmosphere, yet to Elara, they were a bittersweet reminder of a home that had gone silent. Naomi shifted uncomfortably, her fingers tracing absent patterns on the cool metal surface of the bench. "I never thought we'd sit like this again," she said softly, eyes fixed on the far horizon where the last vestiges of twilight clung stubbornly. Elara's gaze remained locked on the sky. "Neither did I." Her voice was steady but carried a quiet weight. "But it's good to be here now. We've lost so much, but maybe there's still something to hold on to." The colony's fracturing had taken its toll on everyone, but for Elara and Naomi, it was personal. The silence from Earth had been more than a cosmic mystery. It had severed the last threads connecting their family to their origins. Memories of childhood under Earth's blue sky, their parents' stories, and the warmth of distant kin surfaced with a piercing clarity that both comforted and ached. Naomi swallowed hard, her eyes glistening. "I was angry at you for leaving me behind, for getting lost in your work when we needed each other the most." Elara turned to face her sister fully, her sharp eyes softening. "I was trying to find a way to bring us back, to bring Earth back. I thought if I could understand the silence, maybe I could fix it." The sisters sat in silence for a moment, the unspoken apologies weaving between them like a fragile thread of hope. Around them, the hum of the colony's life pulsed faintly, distant chatter, the clinking of tools, footsteps echoing through the halls. It was a world on the edge, torn by fear and suspicion, but also by the faint pulse of resilience. Elsewhere in the colony, Mira Solon met with Captain Soren Hale in one of the communal halls. Their conversation was low but earnest, the tension between the factions palpable even in their cautious words. "We can't afford another breakdown," Mira said, her bright eyes scanning the room as murmurs of unrest rose from nearby clusters of settlers. "If Elara's right about the transmission, we need to come together fast." Captain Hale's expression was grim. "Rykov won't stand for that. He's tightening his grip, and his loyalists are ready to strike at the first sign of weakness." Mira nodded. "Which is why we need to build trust where we can. We have to be the bridge." Back in the observation chamber, Elara had pulled up holographic recordings, fragments of Earth's past, captured in flickering light and sound. Images of oceans, sprawling cities, and endless forests danced before her eyes, each one a ghostly echo of a world that felt more like a dream than reality now. Her fingers hovered over the controls, pausing on a recording of a sunset from her childhood home. The warm hues bathed the room in a soft glow, stirring a longing that settled deep in her chest. "We're not just searching for answers out there," she whispered to Naomi. "We're searching for ourselves, for the humanity we thought we'd lost." Naomi reached out, her hand finding Elara's in a rare gesture of connection. "Then let's make sure we don't lose each other again." The next day, Naomi wandered through the colony's garden dome, one of the few places still nurturing Earth's fragile legacy. She knelt beside a cluster of withered leaves, their edges browned and curling, and gently touched them with reverence. They were remnants of a life that had once thrived under a distant sun, now struggling to survive in this alien world. As she rose, a quiet determination settled over her. The colony's future was uncertain, but it was theirs to shape. If they could hold on to hope, to memory, to one another, maybe they could find a new way forward. That night, as Elara prepared to rest, her mind was alive with the echoes of the day, the sisterly reconciliation, Myra and Hale's fragile alliance, the shimmering images of home that refused to fade. Somewhere beyond the stars, the cosmic silence continued to hold its secrets, but within the colony, a different kind of light was beginning to glow, the light of connection, of rediscovery, of survival. Elara closed her eyes, feeling the weight of isolation lift just enough to glimpse a glimmer of hope. Tomorrow, the work would continue, the decoding, the mission, the fight for trust. But tonight, she allowed herself to believe that even in silence, the echoes of home could guide them onward. The metallic clang of the council chamber's heavy door echoed faintly as Councillor Thane Rykov entered, his tall frame casting a long shadow over the cold, angular room. The dim lighting flickered intermittently, reflecting off the polished surfaces and emphasizing the sharp lines of his face. His gaze was as cold and calculating as ever, a steady flame of determination burning behind his steely eyes. Around the semicircular table, a small group of faction loyalists awaited him, the tension palpable in the stale recycled air. Rykov's voice was low and measured, but it carried the weight of command. The mission Elara Voss leads threatens not only my authority, but the fragile order that keeps this colony from descending into chaos. We cannot allow this insubordination to continue unchecked. A murmur rippled through the group. Some nodded in agreement, while others exchanged wary glances. Rykov continued, outlining his plan with meticulous detail. Covert sabotage targeting the colony's communication arrays and critical infrastructure to force a halt to the expedition and sow distrust among the factions. We must act swiftly and decisively, he said, before Elara's idealism fractures what remains of our control. Meanwhile, in the communal hall below, Mira Solon stood before a restless gathering. The crowd was a mixture of anxious settlers and faction representatives, their faces illuminated by the harsh glow of overhead lights. The air was thick with the scent of recycled oxygen and the faint metallic temps of the settlement's ever-present machinery. Myra's voice was steady but urgent. We cannot afford to let fear and suspicion tear us apart. Our survival depends on cooperation, not division. Elara's mission represents our best chance at understanding what has happened and how to move forward. Despite her pleas, the undercurrent of distrust was unmistakable. Fingers were pointed, and whispered accusations floated through the crowd. The fracture lines within the colony were widening once again. Elsewhere, Captain Soren Hale moved through the dim corridors beneath the settlement, his boots echoing against steel grates and the hum of malfunctioning equipment filling the silence. Emergency lights flickered erratically, casting long shadows that danced along the walls. Hale's face was set in a grim expression as he inspected the damaged communications erased the very lifeblood of the colony's tentative connection to the outside universe. Sabotage, he muttered under his breath, scanning the fractured circuitry. This was no accident. The realization brought a surge of frustration and urgency. The colony's security forces were stretched thin, and any disruption risked igniting open conflict between already fragile factions. Back in the observatory, Elara Voss stood alone beneath the vast dome, her sharp eyes fixed on the unyielding void beyond. The usual tapestry of stars was absent, replaced by an endless black silence that seemed to press in on her very soul. The hum of the instruments around her was a faint comfort, a reminder of the data she tirelessly pored over each night. Her thoughts were a turbulent mix of fear and fierce hope. fear that the colony might fracture beyond repair, hope that the transmission she had uncovered was a key to survival. She clenched her fists, the weight of responsibility settling heavily upon her shoulders. Suddenly, the observatory's panel beeped, breaking the silence. A message from Captain Hale flickered onto the screen. Sabotage confirmed. Systems failing rapidly. Security breach suspected. Immediate action required. Elara's heart quickened. The enemy was not only out there in the cold silence of space, but within their own walls. The mission, the fragile peace, everything was at risk. As the night deepened, the colony braced itself. The threads holding their society together were pulling taut, stretched by fear and mistrust. Yet in the midst of shadow and uncertainty, a spark of defiance kindled in Elara's gaze. The silence might be overwhelming, but the human spirit was not so easily extinguished. The central hall of the colony was thick with the heavy murmur of unrest, voices weaving into a tapestry of dissent and fear. Myra Solon stood at the eye of this storm, her posture firm yet inviting as she raised her hands slightly, seeking silence. The gathered faction leaders, their faces tight with frustration and guarded suspicion, hesitated, then quieted. The faint hum of the overhead lights mingled with the restless shifting of boots on the metal floor. "We are at a crossroads," Myra began, her voice steady and clear, cutting through the tension like a beacon. "Each of you holds the future of this colony in your hands. But division will only hasten our ruin. We must find a way to work together, or we will all fall apart before the silence beyond these walls can be understood." Her gaze swept the room, catching the eyes of hardened veterans, wary technicians, and anxious settlers alike. Some nodded reluctantly. Others remained tight-lipped, their distrust like a shield around their hearts. But the seed of hope was planted. Meanwhile, in the cramped confines of the laboratory, Elara Voss sat hunched over her console, eyes sharp and unblinking beneath the harsh glow of the monitors. Streams of data scrolled endlessly, each fragment a puzzle piece from the cosmic silence enveloping them. The faint patterns she and Dr. Linway had uncovered began to coalesce into something more than random noise, a message encoded in the void. Her hands, calloused from years of meticulous work, danced over controls, adjusting frequencies, running algorithms, chasing the elusive truth buried beneath a galaxy of static. The weight of exhaustion pressed on her, but so did the relentless drive that had fueled her since the day the last transmission from Earth fell silent. Every decoded symbol, every broken phrase carried the promise of understanding and survival. Outside the lab, Captain Soren Hale entered the makeshift meeting room where Myra was still negotiating fragile peace. His authoritative presence commanded attention, and even the most reluctant faction leaders paused their bickering to regard him. After long moments of silence, he spoke, his voice low but resolute. "I've seen what division brings," he said, eyes scanning the room. "If we do not stand together now, we are lost. I will lend my support to this alliance, but everyone must hold to their word." Mira allowed herself a small, cautious smile. The captain's backing was a critical piece in the fragile puzzle of trust they were building. As dusk settled over the colony, painting the sky with muted purples and oranges, Mira found herself standing beside Elara on a quiet overlook. The distant hum of restless crowds drifted up from below, a reminder of the delicate balance they were trying to maintain. They shared a moment of quiet camaraderie, the weight of their responsibility hanging heavy but shared. "We've come far," Mira said softly, "but the hardest part is still ahead." Elara nodded, her sharp eyes fixed on the stars, now barely visible through the colony's atmospheric haze. "The silence isn't empty," she replied, It's waiting for us to listen, truly listen. Together, they faced the uncertain horizon. Their resolve, a fragile but unyielding thread stitching the colony's fractured heart back toward hope. The night deepened, carrying with it the promise that even fractured bonds could heal, if only they held fast long enough to bridge the silence. The room was bathed in the cool, sterile glow of the monitors, the low hum of machinery, a steady companion to the quiet urgency pressing down on everyone present. Dr. Elara Voss sat rigid, eyes fixed on the scrolling lines of data that finally began to coalesce into something comprehensible. Beside her, Dr. Lin Wei's fingers danced over the keyboard, eyes darting between the symbols and the decoded text that emerged word by word. The transmission, once an indecipherable riddle buried deep in cosmic noise, was now revealing its secrets. "Here," Lin whispered, voice tight with disbelief, "the last segment just aligned. It's a warning and instructions." Elara leaned closer, her sharp eyes scanning the message that unfolded. It spoke of a cosmic event, a cascade of phenomena disrupting interstellar communications and threatening the survival of outposts like theirs. But woven into the warning was hope, coordinates to safe zones, protocols for sustaining life beyond the blackout, and an invitation to persevere. "This changes everything," Elara said softly, the weight of the revelation settling over her. "We're not abandoned, we're warned." Outside the lab, Myra Solon prepared to address the colony. The central hall was packed, the murmur of anxious voices ebbing and flowing like tides. As Myra stepped forward, her presence commanded attention, her bright eyes scanning the gathered faces, searching for signs of trust amid the suspicion. "Fellow colonists," Myra began, her voice steady yet warm, "we have received a message. Not just noise, but a call for survival. It's a warning and a guide. We cannot afford to fracture further. Together, we must act." The hall held its breath, the silence thick with uncertainty and the fragile spark of hope. Whispers rippled through the crowd. Some faces showed relief, others hardened in doubt. Meanwhile, Jox Wren moved through the colony's shadowed corridors, delivering fragments of the decoded message to wary faction leaders. His weather-beaten face was uncharacteristically serious, the usual cynicism replaced by an urgent resolve. The underground networks he once operated in now served a higher purpose: to disseminate truth and build fragile bridges between divided groups. Captain Soren Hale, standing apart near a viewport overlooking the alien night, absorbed the weight of the moment. The stars above, once symbols of distant home and unreachable Earth, now held new meaning. The transmission was a beacon in the silence, a call to arms and to hope. Hale's jaw clenched as he contemplated the task ahead, securing the colony's future amid growing unrest and the ominous knowledge now in their hands. Back in the communications lab, Elara and Lin Wei continued their work, piecing together maps and protocols from the transmission. The complexity was staggering. Encrypted coordinates pointing to hidden caches, survival strategies for cosmic radiation surges, and warnings about phenomena that had already begun to affect their planet's orbit. "We have to share this," Elara insisted, but carefully. "If Councillor Rykov hears this before we build consensus, it could tear us apart." Lin nodded, fingers poised above the console. "We need proof, allies, and a plan." As the hours deepened into night, the colony stirred with cautious activity. Teams formed, alliances tentatively forged. The once fractured factions began to listen, driven by the undeniable truth encoded in the stars' silence. Elara found herself at the heart of it all, no longer just the solitary astronomer, but a beacon for a community hanging in the balance. The transmission had given them a way forward, but the path was fraught with peril and uncertainty. In a rare moment of quiet, Elara reached out to her sister Naomi, the rift between them softened by the shared urgency. "We're not alone," she said simply. "Not anymore." Naomi's voice, distant but steady, replied, "Then maybe there's hope yet." The colony's future now hinged on the choices made in these fragile moments, to embrace the transmission's message, to unite against the unknown, and to find light after silence. As dawn crept over the horizon of their distant world, a new chapter began, fraught with risk but illuminated by the resilient spirit of those who dared to listen. But even as hope blossomed, shadows lingered. Councillor Rykov's forces moved quietly, plotting to seize control before the colony could rally. The decoded transmission was both a gift and a challenge, a test of courage, trust, and the will to survive beyond the cosmic blackout. Elara stared out at the stars once more, the weight of the message pressing on her soul. The silence was no longer empty. It spoke of danger, but also of connection, of a universe that still reached out to them, waiting for their answer. "We will answer," she vowed, voice steady despite the tremor in her heart. Together. And with that, the colony took its first steps toward rediscovery. The transmission's signal, a fragile thread, weaving them back from isolation into a future. Uncertain, but alive with possibility. The starship's engines hummed softly as it descended through the thin atmosphere of the colony planet, its sleek frame slicing through the dusty twilight. Below, clusters of settlers, their faces etched with worry and weariness, gathered near the landing platform. Whispers carried on the dry wind, some hopeful, others skeptical as the ship's shadow stretched long across the cracked concrete and rusted metal of the once bustling colony hub. Dr. Elara Voss stood at the ship's ramp. Her hands steady though, her heart pounded beneath the weight of what they carried, more than data, more than signals. It was a lifeline to the future itself. Behind her, the team disembarked. Mira Solin, whose optimism had been a beacon through the darkest days. Captain Soren Hale, vigilant and wary. Linway, calm as ever, clutching her datapads. And Jox Wren, whose rugged exterior belied the sharp mind that had uncovered vital clues in the colony's shadowed underworld. The crowd parted as they approached the council chambers, a fortress of cold steel and reinforced glass, a symbol of authority shadowed by suspicion. Inside, the air was thick with tension. Faction leaders sat in rigid rows, their expressions ranging from guarded interest to outright hostility. At the head of the chamber, Councillor Thane Rykov's cold eyes fixed on Elara with a mixture of disdain and calculation. Elara stepped forward, voice steady as she began to unfold the transmission's secrets. Patterns once dismissed as cosmic noise now revealed a structured message, fragments of warnings, coordinates, and a plea for survival beyond the blackout that had severed their link to Earth. The room's atmosphere shifted, a charged hum of disbelief and dawning realization. "This changes everything," Elara said, meeting skeptical gazers with quiet resolve. "Our isolation is not abandonment. It is a consequence of a cosmic event that affects more than just us. The transmission offers us a path forward if we choose to take it." Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Mira stepped beside Elara, her voice firm. "We cannot afford to fracture further. This message is a chance, perhaps the only one, to unify and survive." Councillor Rykov's voice cut through the moment like a blade, or it is a threat disguised as hope. "We cannot gamble the colony's stability on uncertain signals and untested theories." Debate flared, faction lines drawn sharp and clear. Yet beneath the discord, a seed of change had been planted. Small nods of agreement, tentative questions, and the subtle shifting of alliances hinted at a fragile new beginning. Later, in the quiet of the central plaza, Elara and Mira walked side by side. The hum of distant machinery and the soft murmur of settlers settling into evening lent a fragile peace to their conversation. "Do you think they'll listen?" Myra asked, eyes searching the horizon. "They must," Elara replied. "Because if we don't act, if we cling to fear, we'll lose not just our future, but ourselves." As shadows lengthened elsewhere, the council chambers remained a crucible of power. Rykov's loyalists whispered among themselves, eyes narrowed, plotting resistance. The balance teetered precariously between hope and upheaval. This was the threshold where old fears faced new truths, and the colony's fate hung in the balance. Would they embrace the transmission's promise and forge a path through the darkness, or would suspicion and division plunge them deeper into silence? Ilara's gaze lifted toward the stars, those distant pinpricks of light that had always held her dreams. Now, more than ever, they beckoned with a promise. Despite the silence, connection endured, waiting for those brave enough to reach out and grasp it.